clustering. Our resource person for this session is Mr. Gokul Dev from Amrita College of Engineering and Technology. Gokul Dev sir has an established teaching experience. He also served as a teaching and research fellow in Anna University MIT campus Chennai. Currently, he is working as a professor with Amrita College of Engineering and Technology. His research work includes optimized task scheduling in cloud environment. His areas of interest includes scheduling in cloud computing and data analytics. He has also completed various projects funded by Center for Technology Development and Transfer, Anna University. He has been a resource person for many guest lectures in NITTR Chennai. As a resource person, he has delivered with VI Microsystems Private Limited. He has also given guest lectures and also conducted various workshops in different institutions. He has published many papers in reputed journals. Uh, it's really a great honor to have such a remarkable person with us today. I would now like to request Mr. Gokuldev sir to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, one and all. And this is a great privilege for me to present to the eminent professors and faculties. And my sincere thanks to AICTE as well as IFET for organizing such a needful faculty development program. And let me straight away go to the session. And the session, like we today are going to see is about K-means clustering, and it's one of the very interesting as well as basic way of grouping the things or grouping the data. That is one of the most common thing we need to do when we are going for the data analysis as well as research, whatever we are in need of data. The data science is already, we know it is of grouping and making the data more meaningful. So this K-means will give you an insight as well as a basic way of understanding the data and making it more meaningful with the help of clustering. Okay, so let us straight away go to my presentation and we can start the session. Yeah, so this is K-means clustering. And so this is see, the clustering is a common thing, right? It is not apart from techniques and apart from this part of curriculum, whatever it is, clustering is a very common thing that we experience day to day, right? In a home, we will perform a clustering whenever we want to make a clear meaning of data, or say for example, if you want to reduce the time of if you want to reduce the time of searching, or if you want to reduce the time of retrieval, whatever it is, you can go for this sort of clustering. Okay, so even we will even for our food we will do clustering, right? We will have, if you are using a carrier box, you will have different sort of things we cluster. Okay, it may be your rice, it may be your other dishes. You'll have, that is also an example for cluster. Okay, so that is it's a very common thing. We can expect everything around us, and that helps. That is actually a cluster is a very interesting thing as well. Okay, so that is the way we need to understand the cluster. And and we have so many different varieties of cluster. Okay, the clusters, we cannot expect everything to happen under the same mechanism. Each and the purpose of cluster is same, but how we are going to reach that cluster, or how we are going to define a cluster, it depends upon the mechanism, or depends upon the need of the users or the application. Okay, so we cannot expect every ordering is same like another ordering, right? We cannot expect the same thing. So it's all up to the users and up to the customers, or whoever is going to use the data. It depends upon the need of the data. So that is the major thing that is going to decide the way of clustering, right? So that is the thing. So generally we can understand this clustering as a set of techniques used to partition data into groups or clusters. That is the basic idea of a cluster. So clusters are loosely defined as group of data objects that are more similar to other objects in their cluster. So that is the key parameter we need to understand in this K-means. Okay, the similarity plays a very important role when it comes to the cluster. So the similar objects, that is a easier way to for any type of clustering. So that is the theme. The programmer or the analyst will give priority. That's based on the similarity of the data, and how they're going to cluster. It depends upon the application. So the similarity plays a very key role when it is comes to this clustering. So the basic qualities we expect from this clustering is this meaningfulness as well as usefulness. That's what we know already. If you want to have a good insight of the data, so every data we cannot be understood that can be helpful, correct? So only when it is properly organized, it is of it will give us a fruitful result. That's what we know already with this databases also, right? We in that the database itself is the base of this all this data analytics and other so many data-based techniques. So what we do in a database is like we will organize the data, and we'll have so many mechanisms we use to we'll perform some normalization parameters, we'll perform this other sort of like these so many different normalization forms are available, and we have so many of serializability principle we will follow. So everything, the purpose of the organizing the data is to get the meaningfulness out of the data and the usefulness of the data. So that is the two major qualities we expect out of the clustering. So the very basic thing again we need to understand is the k-means comes under the category of unsupervised machine learning algorithm, right? So with this you should understand like what is the difference between this supervised and what is meant by unsupervised and what is meant by this. The another type is called as reinforcement based, and this is the very basic layer of learning algorithms that is available in the machine learning. So supervised learning, we know, right? It is every data comes with a label. Fine. So every data, if it is as the name itself, we can easily understand. It is supervised. It means every data we can that comes under some supervision. It means we know it is labeled. Okay, every data will be labeled, so it can easily I will alert the data. Okay, if it is even if the data is scattered. Okay, if you have a large set of data is been scattered, then also it is not a problem. I may put some basic effort to group the data based on the labels on the data. Labels is nothing but I can say, for example, there are some, I have some, I'm going to give a, I have collecting a bunch of chocolates to give to my friends, right? So every chocolates come with its own brand, its own color. Every say for example, it may be of a different like it's like cat, it may be a Dairy Milk, or it may be of other company. If I'm, it is everything. If it is of I'm collecting it as a bunch, and suppose I want to categorize this chocolates, bunch of chocolates, I can easily classify because everything, every chocolates comes with a label. Okay, it will mention it as Kit Kat, it will mention it as chocolates or whatever it is. I can easily classify the data. That's what we call it as supervised learning, right? Every data comes with a label. Okay, so with that label, we can easily understand. We'll make them understand that this data particular belongs to this category A. Say for example, if it belongs to this Dairy Milk chocolate, another chocolate belongs to Kit Kat, and another one belongs to this Dairy Milk, whatever it is. So this is what we call it as supervised. So what is difference in unsupervised is unsupervised doesn't comes with labels. Okay, so data will be scattered. The same thing that we will have data, but we cannot expect the data to be labeled. So that is the major difference between, or the unique difference between the supervised and unsupervised. So unsupervised, we cannot expect the data to be labeled. We don't know. We don't know how to classify initially. Okay, so we need some mechanism in case of unsupervised learning. We may go on finding out some other categories like features. We can go for finding out the features of the particular data, and according to that feature, we can easily classify the data. Okay, say for example, I have imagine we have a basket of this fruits. Okay, I have a basket of fruits and many fruits. Say for example, some 10 apples, some oranges, some mangoes, and some other fruits like guava, so, and some like pineapple. So every set of fruits I'm collecting in a basket. Okay, so initially, you're giving to your a small boy or your child or your brother or whatever. He's somewhat like some 1 or 2 years boy. Okay, so how he will use? He don't know about the labels. He doesn't know about the types of thing and nothing. We know that it is an apple. So when a newcomer or when a new boy, he's boy or a girl, he's trying to sort out the fruits. What he can do is he can understand the feature. Say, for example, he can understand the feature of an apple. It may have a different color. An orange has a different color, and this pineapple will have a different color, right? And there may be like a mango will look like a different object. So we can understand about the feature of the data. Okay, when we don't have the labels in the data, we can go for finding out the feature of a data. Okay, so that makes the thing unique. So when a data is coming with some features, we can easily classify the things with the help of the features. That comes under this unsupervised learning, right? So the reinforcement learning is another sort of thing. We'll based on learning each and every time we will keep on learning from the environment. We'll keep on learning from the ambience, and we will and the learning will become a part, and the knowledge will become the part of the implementation. So that's what we call it as a reinforcement learning. But that is beyond our discussion today. So let us go with this unsupervised machine learning. Like, so we know like this K-means belongs to this. So that's what I want to conclude. So this K-means belongs to an unsupervised machine learning algorithm. And in contrast to traditional supervised learning, K-means attempts to classify data without having that. That's what we told. It won't have a label, and it will go with the initial set of things. Okay, it may be of the initial trained data or whatever it is. So overview of these clustering techniques. Selecting an appropriate clustering algorithm for your dataset is a difficult choice. So it may be of characteristics of clusters, the features of the dataset, the number of outliers, the number of data objects. So whatever it is, these are the parameters that may influence us to take a decision over the clustering techniques. And these are the common clustering algorithms available. It starts from partitional clustering, hierarchical clustering, and density-based clustering. So the part we have, as we told, that the purpose of clustering is to uniquely classify the things. But when it comes to some needs, or when it comes to some demand, the way of mechanism or the way of clustering may be different, but the purpose is same. So the partition clustering divides the objects into non-overlapping groups. So this k-means and k-medoids are the some algorithm that comes under this partitional clustering, right? It means we should clearly classify the data such that there shouldn't be any overlapping, right? If the cluster, whatever it is, if you want to group up the data, every data should be closely associated with one cluster. There should not be any overlapping, and there should not be any ambiguous while selecting the clusters. So every data should be clearly defined, or that should be clearly mapped with the proper cluster we are going to define. So that is the aim of this partitional clustering. And there's next. So again, we can the main again we can the another thing is the user the techniques will help you to specify the value of this k. Say for example, I can define how many. So the same. I will come to the same example of that fruits. I have some collection of fruits. Okay. So if I want to, so you are going to start a new shop. Okay, fruit shop. So what you should know initially, what you are going to do is you are collecting all the fruits from a wholesale market, and now you are going to create separate racks for each and every fruit. When you go to a fruit shop, you can see this. They will have a separate racks. They won't mix the fruits, right? That will become so complexity. Even it will affect the users, correct? We won't go for a market, or we will go for a shop which has been unordered, or it's just been poorly ordered, right? So the same thing happens here. So what a shopkeeper will do is he will get all those fruits. He will find out how many types of or varieties of fruits he have purchased. Say for example, he have purchased some 10 varieties of fruits. Then what he will do he will allot some 10 number of slots, right? The same thing happens here when it comes to this k-means. It all depends upon how many categories we want to divide, or how many categories we are going to create to allot the data, right? We may have so many number of data. And we need to understand the varieties of data. Accordingly, we can create the value of this k. So the k, we should clearly understand the value of k can be defined by the user. But again, if you want to understand whether the value of k, what we have defined is actually going to help us, there also we have the mechanism to understand whether the value of k, what we have chosen is, or whether it will map or whether it will match with the among the data available with us. So that is also it is possible. So don't worry about that value of k. It is user defined. That is fine. That is initially it should be user defined, but still you can identify or verify whether the value what we have chosen will help the data what we have in hand. Okay, it may differ. Sometimes it may be less, or sometimes it may be greater than what we decide. So it depends upon we have a method that we will see in this discussion as well. So that is the idea of this k-means, and the k-means belong to this partitional clustering, and it will go through an iterative process to assign subset of data into the k clusters. So that's what I'm trying to say. So we have we have split it into many clusters, depends upon the varieties of data, and we'll keep on iterating the things, right? So we will keep on iterating the things. It means we will have so many verifications. Okay, so we will validate the things again and again. So until when there is been clearly allotted, and there is no such ambiguous, we can stop until when there is no such ambiguous conditions being met, or if we are completely fine with the data as well as the clusters. So that is also, it can be programmatically also we can prove that the things. So we need to have understanding about the iteration process. So the k-means and k-medoids comes under the concept of partitional clustering. So this the strength of this k-means is they will work well when the clusters have a spherical shape, and they are scalable with respect to algorithmic complexity. So that is one of the strengths of this k-means as well as k-medoids. And like if you are going for some complex shapes, then you may not expect, we cannot expect that much accuracy in the clustering. So that is a weakness. And like when we are trying to break down the densities, then also it will have a problem. Say for example, with different sort of variations, so many variations of data. Okay, so that may also have the difficulty with the k-mean clustering. And another thing is we can go for this hierarchical clustering. So the hierarchical, as the name indicates, we can, it's like a type of step-by-step evolution, right? Sometimes it may be of bottom up, and sometimes it may be of top down approach, right? So once we get into this hierarchical clustering, we should remember about the concept of tree structures, right? So every clusters formed here will look like a tree structure, right? Sometimes it may be like a top down, or sometimes it may be a bottom up approach. So it depends upon the data available with us. And the bottom up approach, we call it as an agglomerative clustering, and the divisive clustering we call it as the top down approach, we call it as this divisive clustering, right? So in this bottom up approach, it merges the 2 points that are most similar, right? So again, every point you should understand with that key term similarity. Okay, so that is the center of this center point of all those discussion, right? So the similarity plays, whatever the techniques we are understanding, the similarity is the key term we should remember with respect to the clustering concept. Okay? So that is the thing. So when it is a bottom-up approach, it merges the 2 data points that are most similar, right? So until all the points have been merged into a single cluster, it will go like a bottom to top. Okay, so it will have some data scattered. Okay, then they will understand the similarity of data, and they will get into touch with each and every other data points, and they will form a neighborhood. Then they will form it as a cluster. So that is the way of agglomeratory clustering. And the divisive clustering is, initially they will be having different set of people grouped under a same hut, and what they will do is, based on the conditions, or based upon the some features, they will slowly form into divisive clustering. So that's what, it's a very common thing what we are like divide and conquer approach, right? So that is the same thing happens here. We will, if the set of data is been grouped under a same category, we will categorize the data based on some features, and we will understand, and we will try to split up the data into separate clusters. So that's the thing. So this method produces a tree-based hierarchy of points called, we call it as a dendrogram. And similar to partitional clustering, hierarchical clustering, often it is also, it has been predetermined by the user, but still it is, can be changed based on the need. And the clusters are assigned by cutting the dendrogram at a specified depth. So that is the thing. So it can be, we can define. So if there is no such, if there is a similar, there is a difference between the similarity, there we can cut that tree, and each and every partition we can split up into a separate clusters. So that is the thing with this different types of clustering. So we have come across this types of clustering: partitional clustering, hierarchical clustering, and the next one is about this density based clustering. So the density based clustering is a very interesting thing again. Like if you have if you want to make a quick decision, okay, this may be of this type of density based clustering will make you to take some quick decisions. And say for example, if you are viewing a satellite image of the Earth from and it is you're going through this satellite image, you can quickly understand the regions which has been highly vegetated and less vegetated, right? So you can easily understand which has been high, which has a good vegetation, and which has some dry areas. So this is very we don't need to have such algorithms or any other thing to come into a decision, right? It is all based upon the density. Say for example, if you have if you want to decide upon a place which is highly vegetated, you can find some green colors will be of highly dense in a particular area. So we can have a decision that this area has been good, that has been properly vegetated. And if you are seeing about the places of some other arid regions, now we can clearly understand that it has been completely dry and it is in need of some other vegetation, some other techniques to enhance things. Say in even in case of many such countries are following the same, right? So say for example, Israel, they are even a dry area, they are actually they are adapting to new things, right? Even in the dry area, they are trying to improve so much of vegetation. They are trying to implement some internet of things, IoT techniques, and they are using that sort of things to improve the vegetation of that area. So many things are available, right? So it depends upon the needs. So the density is a sort of a quick decision making thing. It determines the cluster assignment based on the density of data points in a region, and the clusters are assigned where there are high densities of data points separated by the low density region. So that is the way of using the density based clustering. So again, here we don't need of any categories or clustering categories, like we have to specify the clusters or number of clusters. So it is as we know, like it's again, as I told already, it is not about deciding the value of k, or we are not going to make it much complex. So we are going to, if you are in a situation to make a quick decision, we can go with this density based clustering. So even we can understand about the Google traffic. Okay, if it's Google map, that also we can come, they can also either using this type of density based clustering based on the traffic, based on the number of traffic, we are not going to go for their clusters, right? So if based on the density of that particular region, that map can take a decision of the whether the particular road is being highly populated, or if there is how the other roads are being properly managed. So that sort of things we can make use of this density based clustering. And they excel at identifying clusters of non-spherical shapes. So that's the thing that we can clearly, and it is not restricted to some sort of like spherical shapes. So even it can go for different sort of shapes, like that. It is not possible in the partitional as well as hierarchical, and they are resistant to outliers. And the weakness is they are not suited for clustering in high dimensional spaces. So that is also another drawback. If you have so many dimensions of spaces, then it may not be suitable, because it will be focusing on one particular place which has been highly populated when it is compared to the other places. So that is the weakness of this density based clustering. So next we go to this, our focus is on about k-means clustering. So let us straight away go to this k-means clustering. So as the name indicates, this K refers to number of clusters you are going to plan, or number of categories you are going to decide, right? And that means is the sense it will keep on iterating. It will find out the mean of the data, and until the cluster is being properly defined. Until the cluster has some, each and every cluster has clear allocation of data, we will keep on iterating the process with the help of taking the mean of the data available as well as the centroid. The centroid is also another important tuning parameter that helps you to decide this k-means algorithm, right? So say for example, we can use in, as we told, like we can have this clustering, we can imagine in almost any such situations. It can be of household things, right? If you are going to your if you say for example, if you are going to your kitchen, there also we will do so much of clustering techniques. If you're going to your study room, there also we will do so much of clustering. And if you're going to our library, there also they are following this type of clustering, right? So it is almost, we can see everywhere, we can see this clustering mechanism. And this K means, again, it will like comes with this. So let's take an example of, it's an IPL season, we can go with an example of how to identify the bowlers and batsmen. That is a very like, basic task, right? So we are going to define that who is a bowler and who is a batsman, and it needs some experience. So it means at least we should take some 10 matches. We cannot able to define with one match, right? So it may be sometime a good batsman can leave with a duckout, or some best bowler can score abnormally. He may score a century in a match. So we cannot able to constrain with one or two data. So we may go for some 10 matches. Okay, so we're considering some 10 matches, and out of the 10 matches, we are going to find out who is been properly identified as bowlers and who is the batsman. So the obvious thing is, we know is, so the bowler will have more wickets and the batsman will have higher runs. So that is the key parameter that is going to decide this. So this is the first way. So we need to classify like this. Okay, so it may be of runs and wickets, and we are making this runs as an y-axis and this wicket as an x-axis. And here, say for example, if the person is taking so many wickets, okay, say for example, in that 10 matches, we have taken the number of players. Some players has scored good runs and they are not taking wickets, and some, if they are bowlers, they will be having their role in the wicket spot. So the graph will be going like this. They will having, this is the count of wickets, correct? So the players and with their wickets will be of in an incremental way, and this is the runs for each and every player. So this is the run scale. So the players who having good batting skill will have they will have the graph with they will have their map with this y-axis, which is the runs. So this is the one cluster. So now, so initially when you are, if it is not the case, if you put just like a scattered way, it is of no use, correct? So what we can do is, we can try to cluster those things. Okay, this is a very initial way of doing the cluster. The need is to, we want to make it, or we want to categorize. At least we want to make it as a range for our later stage exploration of the data. So we will group it into separate clusters, and each and every clusters we will, and we can identify, we can give some different names or boundary or whatever it is. So just for our identification, we are giving it as an blue, as well as this another orange color as a cluster 1 and cluster 2. So in cluster 1, we can see that this cluster has players with high runs and low wickets. So that is the inference we can obtain from this cluster 1. And another thing is, this cluster 2, we can see that this cluster has players with high wickets, that is high wickets and low wickets. Okay, so this is of with respect to the wickets as well as run. So this is the way we can easily identify this cluster 1 and cluster 2. When we understand this cluster, so now this cluster 1 will have the points inside this cluster 1, or the data inside this cluster 1 will be the outlier for this cluster 2. Okay, so that the purpose is, there should not be any overlapping. Okay, so there may be, initially there may be overlapping. So that's what we will keep on doing iteration until the difference is less. So that we will understand in the remaining part. So as the initial stage, we need to understand that the first thing is, we want to map the data, or we need to plot the data. And once we have plotted the data, the next thing what we need to do is, we will try to slowly group the data into cluster. That's what we have done here with the help of cluster 1 and cluster 2. And again, what happens is, initially 2 centroids are assigned randomly. So you may have different points, right? So we need to have a single point of control. Imagine like it's like a single point of control. As every data are scattered, we need to make another, that is the next procedure. Okay, initially we have grouped the things. Next, we are interested in finding out one data which can have more priority over other data. The priority in the sense it's not with, it's nothing to do with any other functionality. The priority in the sense one which has uh, unique or one which has a close distance with all the other data around the cluster. That's what we call it as a centroid. That's a mathematical meaning. You can clearly understand what is meant by a centroid. That one point which can have which will become like a center point for all other remaining data points. Right? That is the thing. So initially we don't have any mechanism to select the centroid. So what we will do, we will directly go for finding out a random assignment of the centroids. So initially two centroids are assigned randomly for this runs as well as wickets. So the another thing, to measure this centroid, we will go for this Euclidean distance is used to find out the centroid to that is closest to each data point. So once we found out this centroid, what we will do is we will try to map all the remaining data points to that particular centroids, and we will find whether this is actually working with the data or not. Say for example, this data points will have a the value of this difference will be high when you are comparing these points with this centroid point of this cluster. And the same like if you are comparing these data points of this runs with the centroid of these wickets, the difference will be high. So now we can understand that this. So at the same like if we compare the centroids within the cluster, okay, if you are comparing the centroids with the data points within the cluster, the distance will be very low. So if the distance is low, we can agree that this cluster, this centroid can has the eligibility to become like a the centroid of that particular cluster, right? So the measure or the thing which will help you to decide this distance is this Euclidean distance. This is normally we have some 4 mechanism to find out the distance, but this is the normally we will use this sort of Euclidean distance for maintaining a basic level of data analysis. So we will keep on iterating the things. So the process is iteratively repeated until our centroids become static. So why we are doing this is because initially we chosen a random point, right? So we chose a random point in the 2 clusters. Okay. So initially we will choose a centroid for this runs as well as we need to choose a centroid for this wickets. So initially we made a random assignment. So we will not be, we cannot assure that that random point will be a clear one to define all those points. So what we will do is we'll keep on iterating the things. So iterating in the sense, say for example, if the data is continuous, okay, if the data is continuous, this iteration will be of playing a very important role, right? Or if the data is it's like a very static data, we can conclude this iteration in a very simpler way. Okay, so it depends upon the data we are going to use in our hand. It all depends upon how this data, whether it is a discrete data or whether it is a continuous data. It decides how many types of iterations we need to perform. So when we need to stop this iteration is once we found that centroids are become static, it means the value is not been changing. Okay, almost we need to compare each and every data points with the each centroids individually. We want to compare every data points with this centroids, right? Say for example, if you have some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that is we have some 5 and 6, we have some 11 data, right? So in that we have taken 2 as centroids. So remaining we will have some 9 data. So each 9 data we need to compare with both the centroids. So that is the thing here. So sometimes during the time it may change, right? So what we need to do is accordingly during the iteration we can conclude that this some points within the data has complete eligibility to become a centroid of that cluster, right? So it means this particular, say for example in this diagram, this particular point, this particular centroid will have very close distance with all other data. So that's what we call it as, we are making it as a new cluster, right? So initially we had a random cluster. Now we have come up with a new cluster which will have a very close distance with the all the remaining data points of the cluster 1. Okay, you can name it as cluster 1. And another thing we can have, we have made this cluster earlier, we had a random assignment here, but during the, after the iteration, we had the cluster here. That position, you need to watch out this position. This position been considerably, we have the position of this centroids been changed in these iterations. So that decides the new centroid that is being, that need to be used for remaining part of the k-means classification. So we can have so many applications of this k-means clustering in different sort of things, like if it is for an academic performance, we can use it for the diagnostic system. So most of these this k-means clustering we can use for all those things, even for search engines. This, even if it is for a research based on wireless sensor networks, we can make this k-means a very common parameter in finding out the when you are designing up, when you're going to decide upon the ranges for your sensor, or if you're going to find out the path. Okay, if you are going to find out the path in which you are going to traverse, so then also we can expect the role of this k-means clustering to identify whether a node will help you to take the or to carry your data and to transport your data or whatever it is. That is also we can expect almost many things. It's not only limited to wireless sensor networks. Even for cloud domain also we can we can make use of this k-means clustering for finding out the virtual machines. Say for example, there are so many research are available based on finding out the like some sort of relativity between the virtual machines. Okay, so how much related they are, and how I can believe that particular VM can complete my task, how I can migrate, in which parameter I can migrate my task from one virtual machine to another virtual machine. So if it is belongs to a same category of machine, and that category, if I want to decide upon the category to choose the virtual machine to migrate my work, then also I can expect the use of this k-means clustering, right? So this is, and then academic performance also we can find out who is belongs to range. This is a very common thing we will use for, is the help of this Excel also we will do this, right? We will go for classifying the things based on ranges, right? Say if it is from 50 to 60, that comes under another category. Some, if it is 90 to 100, we can category into A or whatever it is. So it depends upon the marks and grades. And diagnostic systems, this so we got some insight about this diagnostic systems. And the same thing, like if you are using for this k-means also, you can expect this diagnostic systems to classify or find out the which sort of disease, if you want to perform, how to classify this, how to overcome this, whatever it is. It depends upon the application, and it is for a search engine also we can expect to find out in from which server I could retrieve that data, or from which server I can show that particular document or whatever it is. And this is the, as we told, like we have some that distance measure is the another key parameter we need to decide when we are going to perform the centroid calculation. So this Euclidean distance is the common thing we will use in this k-means. So the Euclidean distance is the ordinary straight line, right? So this is a distance between 2 points in an Euclidean space. It is a normal point. Say for example, how each and every point, what is the difference between this point P and point Q, right? So that will decide. Say for example, if you are imagining this P as an centroid, and this is another random point, if you want to measure this distance between this centroid and that particular data point, you can imagine with the help of this straight line equation, and you can understand whether how it is been related. So once you compare this particular point with all the data points, then you can have a conclusion, right? So you can conclude, okay, you can, so there is no such necessity to fix the proximity at the earlier stage. Once you compare this particular point with all the other data points, you may get a conclusion that, say for example, sometimes the difference starts from 0.5. Okay, it's a random way. Okay, so sometimes it will start from some 0.10, whatever it is. So it depends upon the application. So based on the distance measured, we can find the range, and accordingly we can map this Euclidean distance, and we can decide upon the centroid. And this is also more or less same. The squared Euclidean distance is nothing but the square of this distance. So that's what we are using here. This distance formula, normal distance formula, sigma of q1 qi minus pi and the whole square, and we are mentioning it is squared. So we have the square root. That's what we call it as Euclidean distance measure. And the square distance is again the square of this Euclidean distance. That is nothing different. It is a squared Euclidean distance measure as well as this Euclidean distance measure. And the next one is we need to know about this Manhattan distance measure. So that's something like if you are using this distance measure with the help of some angles. Okay, so if it is some difference between the if you are going to work with the excuse me. Session. Yes, session, sir. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sorry. So the Manhattan distance actually measures with the horizontal and vertical components. Okay, or distance between the axes. If you are, this is the previous thing. We will work with the points. We never worry about the axis, but the graph. Okay, so the points in between the axis will decide the if you want to get into that variations in the axis, and if the data points are like this located in different axes, then we can go with this Manhattan distance, and that's the same thing happens here with the help of qx and point of px of this particular point plus the qy and the py. That is because it is been available in both the x-axis and y-axis. We need to take both this x as well as y values for measuring this Manhattan distance. Then the cosine distance measure is also like it is like this cosine distance similarity measures the angle between the two vectors. Okay, it will measure, it will go with the vector value. Okay, rather than getting into the distance value alone, it will go into this finding this angle between the two vectors. Okay, so again it will consider this q1 as well as q value as well as p value, and it will perform the product of this q1 square followed by the p1 square. Based on this, it is like a normal hypothesis. It will measure how it is been used in this cosine distance measure. So the thing is, commonly we will, it depends upon the application. Okay, so if it is like a normal measure, if you want to find out the difference only in the case of the points, we can go with this Euclidean distance, or we can go with this squared Euclidean distance. Or if the space is getting if it is like 1 or 2 dimensional, we can expect this. If the space is getting multi-dimensional, then parallelly we can go with this Manhattan distance as well as cosine distance measure. So okay, it depends upon the space of data we are having in our hand. And this is how the k-means clustering will work. It will start with an elbow point. Okay, so that's what we name it as k. This is the somewhat successful method of finding out the value of k when compared to other methods. Okay, so some more methods are available, but comparatively, this elbow point is one mechanism which can help you to find out the prominent. It is one of the prominent way of finding out the value of k. So that's what we told. Like k value we can decide initially. We don't need to deviate from that. The k value can be determined. That is, it is predetermined by the user. But still, if you want to find out whether this particular k is been properly defined, or whether we have chosen this k as a proper number of clusters. The k is nothing but the number of clusters. Correct? I hope you remember. The k is nothing but the number of clusters we want to define, we are going to plant. That in that fruit example I have mentioned, if you have some 10 varieties of fruits, you need to have 10 clusters or 10 tracks. So that is the same thing happens here. If you have some varieties of data, we can, according to that data, we can define this value of k. And once we measure this, once we find out this k, we need to measure the distance, and measure the distance in the sense we need to find out whether this particular centroid as well as the distance between the points, other points is what is the measure, and how we want, with the help of this Euclidean distance formula we can measure. And based on that thing, we need to group the grouping will be based on the minimum distance. So the points which has minimum distance with the centroid, that will be grouped. And again, we need to reposition the centroids. This is mandatory because initially we will go only for a random selection of centroids. So this is mandatory. We need to reposition the centroids. And if the again, if the clusters are unstable, now again we will go for this measuring the distance. So this part we call it as iteration. Okay. So the k-mean will keep on iterating the things until we are satisfying with the clusters we are having in the hand. So once if the final once we are done with these centroids, and the iteration will stop when we have no more changes, or if the distance is completely fine, if we have perfectly allotted the data and we have grouped the data and the centroid properly, then we can state that particular cluster is stable, and finally we will reach to the convergence. Okay, so if you are planning to converge earlier, then we cannot able to. If the clusters are unstable and if you are going to stop, then it will make you to poor convergence. Okay, so that we cannot expect the perfect k-means here. So only when the clusters are stable, it means no more variations are found, we can stop that clustering, and we can find that as a convergent state. It means completely we have allotted all the clusters, all the data along with the centroids, and we have perfectly formed a cluster. So that's what we call it as a convergence here. So it may be of let us see one by one how this help you. So it's again a normal data set for a grocery shop, and how would you choose the optimum number of clusters, right? So it depends again. You can initially we know, right, how to initially we will define the random number of clusters. Let us see how it is been actually working here. So the first thing is we need to know about this elbow point. So as we know, right, this elbow method is a sort of like a graph. Once you see this graph, you can understand this is the elbow point, right? So we have two parameters in the two axes. One is the number of clusters, and another one is this WSS. So WSS is nothing but within sum of square. The same thing, like what we know is we need to find the distance between the cluster, there is member of the cluster and its centroid. So that's what we name it as mathematically as within sum of squares. So we will the elbow method will try to run the data set, right? Say for example, this if you take this graph, this k value is nothing but the clusters, number of clusters, right? So initially, once if you understood this graph clearly, there may not be any questions. Say for example, if we have a graph like this, in that case of when the value of cluster is 1, okay, in that x-axis, when the number of clusters is 1, we can understand that there is there's been completely scattered, right? The data would have been completely scattered because all such data will be in a same place. Okay, when the value of k equal to 1, it means there is only one space, and we want to accommodate the data in that one cluster. It means every data would have been scattered, right? So when the value of k equal to 2, now we can understand. So that's what this WSS value is high. Okay, when the value of k equal to 1, just try to map the number of clusters and WSS. Okay, when the number of that x-axis, when the value is 1, the WSS value in the y-axis is certainly high, because every data points will be scattered. So there will be that WSS value will be certainly it will high. There will be so many differences in the data as well as the centroid, right? So when you are making the value of k equal to 2, there is a much what we can remarkable change in the WSS value. It's been remarkably reduced, and now we can understand that now when you are making two clusters, this WSS value is being reduced. It means when you are making two clusters, now this data in the two clusters is being closely associated with the centroids. Can you understand the difference? So that is the major difference of this elbow point. You can clearly understand. So if a k value equal to 1, it means if that is nothing but you don't have any cluster, right? So if a k value is 1, means you have only one space, okay, one cluster. It means every data would have been scattered, right? So that is the thing we need to understand. So once you are going once you created this two clusters, when you're creating this value of clustering equal to 2, it means Now the data are grouped into two clusters. And now with respect to these two clusters, this WSS value will be certainly low. And it will keep on getting decreased as with the number of clusters. So that is not mandatory that we need to go with all the 8 clusters. Okay, we have planned for 2 clusters, correct? So after this 2, almost every number of clusters providing the same WSS value, right? So we can understand that it can be from 2 to 2, 3 or 4, whatever it is, that can behave as a proper number of clusters. Okay, so that's what we are going to decide with this elbow point. So that's what we call it as an elbow point, because this L shape will decide in which point we are going to converge. This will call it as an elbow point. Okay, so that shape we can understand which is going to play a unique role here. Okay, so that is the thing we should understand with this WSS method. So this elbow method will have 2 parameters. One is the number of clusters in the x-axis and the WSS value in the y-axis. So WSS is nothing but sum of the squared distance between each member of the cluster and its centroid, right? So that is the formula for this WSS. That is very similar to what we saw in this Euclidean distance, right? So it will measure the data point and the closest point to the centroid, right? So that is the idea of this x1 minus c1 square. So this is again measure the step 1 is we need to measure the say for example you have some delivery points. Okay, so if say for example if you are if you are working on some app, you may face this sort of delivery points, right? So if you want to measure, say for example, you can imagine we can have some we can have, if you want to cluster, say for example you can imagine this is 2 regions. Okay, so in this is of initially if you don't cluster, every data points will have a same category. We cannot able to find out some proper mechanism to split the data. And again, I can give you another example. If we want to allot one manager, okay, this has so many delivery points. You can think of the Swiggy or Zomato or whatever it is. It has so many delivery points, and I want to appoint some supervisor for the delivery points. Okay, that is an that have an imagination like that. So if I am allotting one supervisor here, I am finding that the progress what I expect is not yet been met. Okay, so I cannot expect this that one, when I am making it as one supervisor here, that the performance what I expect is not met. It means I couldn't able to that one supervisor cannot able to manage all the delivery points. Okay, he's a one manager, he cannot able to manage all the delivery points. And what I can do is now the higher official, what he will do is he will try to find out the partitions. He will try to, okay, what he's now planning is, rather than making one as a supervisor of this whole delivery points, I can make it as 2 separate regions, and I can make another one person as another supervisor, right? So now what he can do is he will find out one delivery point, or he can find out one person in the delivery points as a centroid, and based on that he will create into some 2 regions. So initially he can form 2 regions. Okay, so in that for the 2 regions there is no need for any such centroids. So what we can do is we can randomly initialize the cluster centroids. So now we can consider this as a control parameter or a supervisor. Okay, so now we have 2 clusters, or we have 2 centroids that is been randomly assigned. Fine, so that has been randomly assigned. So initially we don't have any such control. We have all the delivery points scattered, and imagine that flow. And when I are trying to make one, it means there is one supervisor, he couldn't able to control the delivery points completely. So I'm assigning 2 random supervisors here, and I'm naming it as centroid 1 and centroid 2. And now what I can do is, now I should decide which are the regions I should allot to this centroid 1 and centroid 2. Okay, so what I will do is I will keep on finding the distance measure, that is the Euclidean distance will be used to find out the distance, to find out which data point is closest to our centroids. That is the procedure we need to perform, right? So once we randomly assign the centroids, what we need to do is we need to allot the data points to the centroids based on the closeness. It means whichever having the less distance what we measure with the Euclid distance, we will allot that particular data points to this centroids. So that same thing happens here. We will keep on iterating the things. So the step 2 is we'll appoint the centroids, and after that we will form into clusters, right? So based on the centroids, we will form the clusters. So even we may not, after this step also, we cannot able to assure that the centroids what we choose is the best person or best one, because we choose it randomly. Just to make it as a cluster, we choose it randomly. But to make this centroid more powerful, we need to go for iteration. So we need to compute the centroid of data point inside the again this blue cluster, and we will again and the same thing happens here. Again, we will keep on compute the centroid of data points in the blue cluster and reposition the centroid of the blue cluster to the new centroid. So again, what we will do is we will keep on iterating the things. It means within this cluster, we will understand each and we will analyze that centroid points with other centroid points. Each and every point we will find out the difference, and we will during the iteration we can understand that some other points having the less distance to all other data points when compared to the previous centroid. Okay, so now we can understand that particular centroid can be replaced by a new centroid, and the same way in that second that is in that blue region also, that is orange region also, that is you can consider whatever name. Okay, you can have it as a cluster 1 or cluster 2 or region 1 or region 2. If it is a region 1, you can take it as a region 2. In that region 2 also, we may not be satisfied with the first one. So what we'll do is we will keep on iterating the things. We will measure the data points of each and every, we will compare the data points of each and every one, and the value which is minimum, right? The data point which has a minimum distance to all other remaining data points will become the centroid. Okay, they keep this statement for understanding about this iteration. So each and every data points we will compare with the other data points, and one data points which has that mean value, okay, which has that mean value which is comparatively less than all other values, we call it as a new centroid. So once the cluster becomes static, we can make it as a converge. So how we can understand it as a static? It means after that iteration, that is when we are keep on iterating, when the distance is completely zero. Okay, there is, it means no such variations has been occurred. Say for example, I may have some iterations. In some fifth iteration, I got some value, and over the time, okay, over the time in the sixth iteration, seventh iteration, eighth iteration, and I'm getting the same value. Okay, so if the value has been clearly managed or uniformly it is been I'm getting this, I can make it as a I can understand that there has been that my solution is reaching some convergence state. Okay, so that's what we can call it as an step 8. So that is the major steps we need to follow in this K-means clustering. That is elbow point, measure the distance, grouping, reposition, and convergence. So this is an clustering algorithm. Pick random points as cluster centroids, assign each value to the nearest cluster, and find a new cluster by taking the advantage of assigned points, and repeat the steps from that. That's the thing you can understand. Right, we can directly go to this program part, so we can execute the program for a example. Is it visible now? Is it visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. So here, this is an example program where we can see I'm using Google Colab. Okay, that is easily available. You can make use of this Google Colab for making use of this Python code. And what I have already inserted I have downloaded a data set for prediction of loan. Okay, so I'm going to so that is also available. If possible, if there is any provision, I will share that data set also with you. That's not a problem. So what we are going to do is, if you downloaded that data set, you directly go to this side, that's files. Click on these files. You will have the provision to upload the files. You can click on this files and you can start adding this new data set, right? You can adding the data set. You will upload this, but I already uploaded, so I'm not going to upload here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some packages that I need to use with this. So another thing you need to understand is for k-means here we are using the mechanism as a separate code, but for specifically for k-means we have a function also. Okay, so once you're going to explore the k-means, don't worry about this coding part. You can easily complete the thing. Excuse me. Can you mute my things now? For a pardon, sir?
Sorry for the interruption. The screen is not visible.
It's not visible. Okay. I will. Is it visible now, sir?
No, no, no.
Okay, I will share again, please. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So what we are going to do is I'm going to see this is a Google Colab we are going to use for this data analysis, right? We are going to use this loan data set. Okay, I have a data set. With that data set, I'm going to predict to which person I can avail or I can give the loan. As a part of a bank, I need to decide whether I can give the loan to that particular person or not. So the same, so you can click on these files and you can upload once you download the data set, you can use this upload to session storage to upload your file, and it will be automatically stored in your Google Drive, and you can start exploring the particular data set. So this is the common libraries we need to explore, and we have this pandas, numpy. Okay, these are some basic libraries we need to import with help of this to explore this Python code. And this is a random. We need to, if you want to generate some random, as we know, like in case of k-means, we need some random assignments. So we need to use this random package, and we need to name all those things. And once if you are going to plot the things, if you are going to make use of some graph, you need to work with this matplot library also. And what I'm going to do is initially I'm assigning some variable data. I'm going to read the particular file. So I have a file name as clustering.csv. So I will once I'm allotting this clustering file to this data, if I'm giving it as data.head, it means it is going to give all the data available with the clustering. Okay. Sorry, I want to execute this first, then I should go with this. If there is some problem, I will alert. Just a minute. Yes. So once this is the command for reading a file. Okay. So this is a variable you can create, and this panda, that's pd dot read csv, is the method to read a file. And this will basically, if you are giving it as head data dot head, it means it give you some first 5 records. That is the default way. So if you want to print a number of records you want to improve, you can give the number of files here. It will give you some more insight of the data. If you want to give some 10 records, I can give it as 10 or whatever it is. So if you want to limit, you can. It is been up to the user. And so once I have done with this uploading of CSV file, what we can do is I need to visualize the points with respect to loan amount and applicant name. Okay, so that is the two parameters I am going to use for this prediction. So this is of scattering. If I want to scatter this applicant income as well as loan amount, and I am going to label this X label as X-axis as annual income, and going to plot this Y label as loan amount, and I am going to plot this. So that is the command for plotting the graph. So once I give this, so initially I got two axes. One is the annual income as well as loan amount in thousand. That's what we have given here. X label is annual income and Y label is loan amount. So I need to scatter the points of applicant income as well as loan amount. Okay, so that is the thing I am going to use for this data. Okay, this is the data with respect to the axis, annual income as well as loan amount. So that is the thing we are using here. And with the help of this, we can visualize all the data is been scattered because we don't have any cluster here. It has been simply scattered across the table. Okay, scattered across this graph. So now we can go for this next step. That is the major thing is we need to define the number of clusters, right? So this is a step 1 and step 2 to define the number of clusters and select the random centroid for each cluster. So as we know, right, we can define the cluster number of clusters by the user itself. So we can define the value of k equal to 3 here, and in that 3 again we can allot the centroids. Okay, centroids is x dot, that is x is nothing but the data what you have stored, you have saved here. Okay, we are storing this loan amount and applicant income from the data. So data will consist of all the records with all the attributes. From this we are interested only in taking the loan amount and applicant income. So that's what we are doing here. So from this x dot, from that x I want to take a sample with n equal to 3. So I want to take 3 centroids. That is the major step we need to do. Correct. So in that centroids we will take the data x, and from that x is nothing but this set of scattering, right? So in that x we need to take some 3 centroids with n equal to k. K is nothing but 3 what we have defined earlier. So again the same thing happens here. We will get the scatter like centroid as like this, and with the help of this coding we can run the we can choose with the centroids. So randomly we will get 3 centroids out of all the data, and we will work on these centroids to and after that we will keep on forming the cluster. So this is a random selection. We know each and every centroid is basically a random selection. And this is the another thing we need to understand about the k-means. Initially, this is for initial assignments. We had a difference equal to 1 and j equal to 0 that will be used in the program. So this block is for understanding the distance of each and every centroids with the other points. Say for example, this ED stands for Euclidean distance. I am defining this. So initially I will take for index 1 comma row of C, it is nothing but we will take the centroid points. Okay, this is to take the centroid points, and this inner for loop is to consider all the data points. So x in that xd we will have all the, we are assigned the value of x. So each and every centroid points will compare itself with the all other points. So that's what we are doing here with the help of this outer for loop and inner for loop. And after we are finding out this distance, we are appending that distance in this ed. So ed dot append the value of d. Okay, so d is nothing but the Euclidean distance. We know in that program, in that theory we saw about the Euclidean distance between the centroid points and the data points. So that's what we are doing here, and we will iterate this value to I plus 1 to make it until the end of the centroids. Then another one we need to do is we need to create the cluster. So here we want to decide the, after finding out the centroid, we need to go for the cluster. In that cluster again we need to go for this for loop. We will assign that first row is a minimum row, and after that we will iteratively we will find out until the value of k is 3. We will keep on iterating. It means For the three, we have decided for 3 clusters. For each 3 clusters, we will maintain the, we will iterate whether which one belongs to which cluster based on the value of the centroid as well as the points. And we'll append the same here, c dot append the position. And now this each and every point will be allotted to one cluster. Okay. So for x of some value, it will allotted to some value of c will be allotted to some cluster 1 or cluster 2 or cluster 3. Majorly we'll have some 3 clusters alone. So for every value of this c, we will be allotted to the particular cluster. And again we'll go for finding out the centroids, and again we'll group the centroids based on the group by method with help of this. This is the default code for this finding out this mean. For each and every cluster, we will find out the mean value, and again we will go for finding out whether until the differences becomes 0. That's what we know already. If the difference between the previous centroids, previously found centroids and the current centroids becomes 0, you will keep on iterating this. So finally, what will, so first for the first iteration, we will get the value of difference equal to 1, and for next iterations, the value will be incremented, and for the difference will be calculated by the centroids of new as well as the centroids of this earlier centroids. So that is the code here. So centroids new loan amount minus centroids of loan amount, right? Plus the centroids of new applicant amount minus the centroids of the applicant income. And finally, we will print the value as the new cluster. So that can be, say for example, so until this value become 0. So finally, after the iterations, you can understand that the difference will become 0. Okay, earlier it may be 402, it has been completely scattered. So for each iteration, it will have some different way of mentioning. So until this distance between the previous iteration and the current iteration becomes 0, this will be repeated. So based on this, again, we'll go for a graphing with the help of this graph, the same thing scattered earlier, right? So after the centroid points, earlier we got the centroid point somewhere above this topmost, like some 140 or 120 this scale, and over the iteration we can have a clear identification of the graph, and also we have given this color combination. So we have changed all the color combinations to blue, green, and cyan, and we can clearly scatter this. We can clearly point out this graph with the help of this k-means clustering, right? So this is a way of executing this k-means, and I can share you that code as well as the data set if needed, and if there is any provision, I will do that. Okay, so if you have any queries, you can let me know. Thanks.
Hello. Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, k value we need to give manually. How can we define k value? So we should, based on our data set, we need to define how
Yes,
many
sir.
clusters.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes. It is like, say for example, if it is about a normal classification, if I want to say, for example, in that previous example, it is to predict whether I should give you a loan or not. So if it is like yes or no, we can define that value can be definitely in case of 2. K value will be 2. And like previous thing, if I have a different sort of data, and based on that varieties of data, I can decide upon the K value. If it is like, as like I told in that fruit example, each and every fruit's feature will be different. And the same thing we can use it for image processing also. So when it is comes to image processing, we can say there may be some 3 different objects we need to detect. And based on that proximity of that data points, we can clearly form a that background of that image, and we can clearly understand that particular object is an animal, or it is an something like a cat, whatever it is. So there also we can define. It is up to the users, sir. Users,
Okay,
and
sir.
it is about the attributes or how many categories we want to define. That decides that.
Okay, so by analyzing the data set only, we can decide how many K values are needed.
Yes, sir. That's a rough identification, sir.
Rough
If you have a data set, yes, initially we can go for a rough identification. I means like I can decide upon, okay, I'll go with some 3 clusters because I have some 3 varieties of data. So if the classification is like that, I can converge in some three set of clusters. But still, we need to go for this type of iterations that will decide the or the elbow method. We can go for this elbow method to decide whether the clusters what I have chosen is will exactly map or not. So that decides it's upon the users as well as the available categories of data.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Nice explanation. And please share us this PPT and along with this code, sir.
Yeah, sure, sir. I will ask the provisions and I will share. Yeah.
Participants, do you have any doubts? You can unmute yourself and sir is ready to address your questions. Participants?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Preeti Basit.
Yes,
Just
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wanted to know what is the optimum cluster size. Basically, we are starting from 2, then we are going increasing to number of clusters 3 and 4. So how long
Yes.
we will be? How can
Yes,
we?
ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once we decide upon the number of clusters, we need to again check all the data points with the centroids. So we will keep on repeating this. If we say, for example, if I'm again expanding another one more cluster, we want to do again from the beginning. We want to define a new centroid. We will again create the iteration process. If there has been no changes in the previous k value and the current k value, that means that there is some very smaller distances. If there has been clearly allotted, then there is no such need for going the furthermore. I will show that elbow point here and say, for example, is it visible, ma'am, now? Now the screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So in that elbow point, say for example, if you are defining this number of clusters, so we have decided with k equal to 2. So if you are trying to increase this number of clusters, you will try to check with WSS value, right? So WSS value is nothing but is the sum of the squared distance between member and the cluster and its centroid, member of the cluster and its centroid. So if the cluster 2, if we have the k value equal to 2, and again you are defining another cluster, and if there is no such reason for if there is no such variations, okay, if the values again, it is maintaining some same set of differences, then there is no need for going to the new cluster. If there is a extreme level of changes in the values of data points and the centroid of the previous cluster, then we can understand that this new cluster can help us. But until then, we don't need to go for a new cluster. That is the elbow point we can understand. After this k, everything has almost same sort of the value differences between the WSS value is almost same. So there is no need for going for the number of clusters, no need to increase the number of clusters. Sometimes that also will make the thing complex. So we need to go for the optimal way of clusters, understanding that that value of this WSS value. Once you understand this definition, you can understand, ma'am. So if it is like number of square distance between each member of the cluster and its centroid is less, okay, if it is been uniformly maintaining, then you can understand that there is no need for going for the new clusters. So in that k equal to 2, we got some value of WSS less, and after that also we don't have much deviations, so we can wind up either with value of k equal to 2 or 3, or maximum we can go up to 4 clusters here, ma'am. After that, it also providing the same value, so there is no need for new clusters.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, I think sir has addressed your doubt. Sir, there are some questions from chat.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Subhash sir has asked for a binary classification problem, which one is better, a higher K or a lower K?
Binary classification problem, for a classification problem itself, we can go for any other techniques. Now, it is not only for k-means, also it is not mandatory here. But if you are going to use this k-means, again, it depends upon the attributes you are going to consider. It is not about the classification. Either it may binary class, yes or no type, whatever it is. It depends upon the attributes which you are going to select. So that is the
Okay.
thing here. It is not going to do with the number of clusters and binary classification. Whatever it depends upon the attributes what we are choosing, and depends upon the value of k we are going to decide.
Okay, sir. And Mamta ma'am has asked, how can we label the class in an unsupervised classification?
Okay, so that is we have labeling mechanism. That is another some deep domain.